All right, welcome to our continuing series of Funders and Founders. I'm Dan Nathan. I'm joined by Emi Gal. He is the CEO, CTO, and founder of Ezra. Okay, this is a company that I've gotten to know because I've become a customer of it and a happy customer. And obviously, friend of the pod, Rick Heitzmann. He is the CEO and founder of FirstMark Capital.
Great to be back, and great to be back talking with Emi about something I'm also a customer and an investor.
Yeah, well, you actually, before I ever met Emi, you were telling me that I have to check out this company, I have to use their service and the like. And so again, one of the things that we're trying to do on this series is kind of find a really innovative founder and really a company that's disrupting some really big sort of established processes in the healthcare industry. And obviously we want to focus a little bit on the origin story, but we also want to focus on Rick and how you found Ezra and how you became a big backer of Emi. You guys continue to invest. You're early stage investors. You guys just raised more money. You're there. You're on the board. And so we want to hit all of that. So Emi, amazing. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
All right. So listen, I got to know you. I got to know the company. I got to know the service. I felt very relieved after participating in the service here. Early detection of cancer and obviously a whole host of other ailments is really your mission.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about how you became a tech entrepreneur, how you founded Ezra, and what was really the impetus for it.
For sure. So a bit of background, I'm originally from Romania. I studied applied mathematics and computer science in Bucharest. And I became an entrepreneur in college, actually. I didn't have any money. I wanted to take a girl on the date. And so I decided to start a software company that built video ad serving technology. That turned out to do quite well. We sold the company to a big ad tech group in New York, and that's how I ended up in New York City. And I started Ezra because I'm personally at high risk for cancer. Actually developed moles when I was a kid, put me in the highest risk bracket for melanoma. Had a slightly abnormal mole when I was very young. And so that kind of put more awareness in me of the importance of screening than most young people. And then sadly, I've had cancer in my family. My mother passed away from cancer. So kind of have a very personal motivation to help people find cancer early.
How much time between obviously you selling your first company and then participating in that, like had you always been noodling on this idea based on your own personal experience?
I have actually. So even while I was running my previous company, I was thinking about cancer in kind of the back of my mind because I was concerned for myself, for my family. And actually the idea for Ezra came on my honeymoon. I was on my honeymoon reading papers, as you do. And I was comparing this paper, reading this paper that was comparing MRI with CT, ultrasound, PET, and other imaging modalities in terms of the accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity of MRI for cancer detection. And this paper was concluding overwhelmingly that MRI is the best imaging modality. So I turned to my wife, we were sitting on these sunbeds, and I was like, hey, if you could do a full body MRI, relatively affordable, very fast, accurate, would you do one? She said yes, and that's how Ezra was born.
All right, so we're going to hit some of the technology. Obviously, approach this from a math standpoint. I think that's your background a little bit. And when we first met, it was before this generative AI boom has basically taken over. The public markets, the private markets. If you didn't have a generative AI strategy, you pivoted to having one at some point late 2023, 2024. Rick, you've invested in health tech before.
And taking this back to, obviously before AI was hot, that, we invested with Emi in 2019.
Yeah.
So you get some things right on timing, you get some things wrong on timing. You put, early on the AI, but obviously putting people in a very enclosed magnet going into COVID was something we couldn't have predicted. But as we, rewinding the clock almost 5 years now, when I first met Emi, a lot of things about the story we liked. We liked technical founders who really could create product themselves. We like founders who are solving a personal problem that is important to them and their family. And obviously we think about Emi, his family, his mother, very personal from that perspective. And we like things that are completely different.
Yeah.
So if you think about, hey, we're going to use AI to look inside your body to potentially save your life. Obviously big, important, interesting, something that's never been done before. So when you put all those things together, it was an incredibly interesting deal, and obviously the compelling founder being the key point for FirstMark.
Well, it's funny. So I think we kicked this series off with Zach Rotano, of Row, and you know Z pretty well, and obviously Rick, you know him very well. I mean, a lot of these stories sound pretty similar, and at the end of the day, you talking so personally about your own experience, Zach, and has done the same thing, and it's interesting because Rick, you're talking about investing in these two companies, probably not too far off from each other, right? From Rose early. What is it about at FirstMark? Again, you like to have the longest view in the room and that sort of thing. How did you guys start to focus on? Can I call it health tech, Emi? I mean, is that fair?
For sure.
Yeah, and digital health, and this is different views on digital health, and we have everything from the largest male fertility clinic to Row with GLP-1s and sex health, and obviously what we're doing here with full body scans. And probably another on the board of the largest drug and alcohol dependency provided online clinic as well, with Work It Health, and not to leave anyone out, another probably half dozen companies. And what we saw was obviously healthcare is the biggest market in the United States, the biggest part of our GDP, the fastest growing part of our GDP, but because of a lot of the other dynamics, the biggest laggard in technology. So either they're parts of that healthcare ecosystem, supply chain, industry that are going to be disrupted by digital, or they're things that digital will just do better. And whether it's delivering drugs, being able to provide a more personal experience that's far superior to what you'd have to see in in a male fertility clinic, or doing things that have never been done before, the things that Ezra's doing. All those things are incredibly interesting to us. And I think there's other mega trends that we see of consumers taking more control over their own health. And we could talk a little bit more about longevity.
Yep.
We could talk a little bit more about higher deductible plans, which is forcing people to be more thoughtful about their spend. But we love the fact on so many different levels of people taking agency of their health, doing things to help them live better, longer, and having a more full life. And Ezra plays into all those trends.
Yeah. So Emi, math led you to the MRI as the best solution for early detection. I mean, so talk about, again, you know what I mean? Like, what was the technical process that's differentiated from, let's say, some of the other, a more traditional sort of healthcare providers? Like, what did you attempt to do? Obviously, I'm assuming it took some different iterations and the like.
It did, actually. So I actually didn't start with MRI in mind as the solution for early detection. And actually, if we take a couple of steps back, I didn't even start with early detection as the focus. I started with the focus of cancer is a big problem. Why is it such a big problem? And started looking at the data and realized that the main reason why cancer is a big problem is because people find cancer late. If you look at cancer survival rates, only 2 out of 10 people who get cancer and find it late survive longer than 5 years. More than 8 out of 10 people who find cancer early survive longer than 5 years. So the cure for cancer, the closest thing we have for a cure for cancer is early detection. The problem is that you only have screening exams for 6 organs in the body. If you take breast, lung, colon, skin, prostate, and uterus cancer, you have well-established screening guidelines. For everything else, if you're unlucky enough to get pancreatic cancer or gallbladder or brain or adrenal glands and so on, you'll generally find out you have cancer when you're symptomatic. If you're symptomatic, it's too late. And so that's how I got to, okay, if you want to make a big impact in cancer, you need to find cancer early. And so I went on a journey to find the best way to find cancer early. And actually, the idea to use MRI was the 12th idea. I went through while I was kind of in the process of
right on the sunbed, you're there
on the sunbed,
romantic honeymoon.
Yes,
reading research,
and I cycled through a number of ideas. And actually, a fun anecdote is that my very first idea was to use a liquid biopsy, ctDNA. It's kind of a very popular trend right now. And I reached out to a scientist at Caltech who was kind of renowned in the genomic space, and he told me, Emi, whatever you do, don't go into this space because we're a decade away from knowing if liquid biopsies work. And my bet is that they won't work due to the lack of sensitivity. You're searching for a needle in a haystack when you're trying to find genetic mutations in the bloodstream that originate from a tumor. And so anyway, I went through a dozen ideas and landed on MRI as the solution. But then the challenge with MRI is that it's expensive.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to
so again, is that why it was number 12 on the list? Because you started with the fact that it's expensive, and in certain geographies, they just don't have them, access to them and the like. So what were some of the early challenges that you were kind of facing other than expense?
So the biggest problem with MRI is that before Ezra, if you wanted to get a full body MRI, you could, but it would cost you $25,000, $30,000. You would have to spend 2 to 3 hours in an MRI machine. And the innovation at Ezra was that we created these AIs that enabled us to decrease scanning time, decrease radiology time, decrease internal processes that we have. And then that saved us costs, and then we passed those cost savings to consumers.
Yeah, so one of the things that, and I know that, Rick, you probably see 10 different decks a day with generative AI, like kind of strewn across the whole thing. One of the things that I think a lot of investors, both public and private, are trying to figure out, like, how is this spend, how is this investment being monetized right now? And you guys seem to be an example of one that's doing it right here and right now. And I remember the first time that you and I met, I mean, you kind of made the pitch, like, our process is not, we couldn't have it this cost effective, and we couldn't roll it out as dramatic if we didn't have this underlying tech, right?
Absolutely.
And so talk to us a little bit about that and how that evolution, because you started probably calling it AI, you know what I mean? But like back then, like there wasn't a great definition. There was the machine learning and this and that, whatever. So how did you guys arrive at this? And you guys actually have an FDA approved process too.
Yeah, so we have multiple FDA-cleared AIs, and we're actually the only company in the cancer screening space that leverages AI of multiple types, generative AI, convolutional neural networks, at every step of the screening process. So we have 3 AIs. Ezra Flash, FDA-cleared, helps us make MRI scans faster and then enhances their quality. When radiologists read MRI scans, they obviously want the best image quality. The faster an MRI scan, the lower the quality. And so what we do is we've built this AI that essentially enhances the quality of MRI images. Once the scan is done, it goes to radiologists. Radiologists need to analyze it. When our radiologists analyze it, they're supported by Ezra Assist. It was originally FDA cleared for prostate, in order to make them faster, potentially more accurate. And then finally, and this is what we use generative AI for, when you look at a radiology report, they're very technical. Most people don't understand what a radiology report says. And so what we do is we translate every single finding in a radiology report into plain English so that anyone can understand what it means, and provide kind of guidelines as to what people should do about those findings.
So you're making, I mean, this is a great example. Like, we keep hearing the promise of AI, generative AI is like productivity gains, right? I'm sure radiologists kind of love this, right?
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about like the first line is doctors and getting their thumbs up on this whole.
Absolutely. So actually, when I started Ezra, this is like 5 years ago now, I was getting a lot of pushback from radiologists because they didn't trust that the AI would actually be good enough for them. And over the years, I've seen a transition from I don't trust it enough to I don't want to work without it. And actually, we have to credit generative AI for a lot of that, because generative AI has helped people understand that these AIs can actually be really, really good, not as a replacement for the doctor or the radiologist or the human, but as a tool that can augment them. And that's how we use it at Ezra.
And even as we think about the customer, right? And what's the ROI for the customer? I mean, I don't know, you can't even put a price on being able to survive cancer, being able to live 5 to 10 years longer, whether you're finding cancer, whether you're finding another malady of a tumor or cardiac calcium or something else that would have dramatic impact on your lifespan or health span. You can't put a price on that. And then you said, okay, well, if I really want to find this out, I could do 2 or 3 days, sit in a magnet for hours at a time, or be using the magic of artificial intelligence. Can I do it in 20 or 30 minutes for 10% of the price? And this is, as we see in a lot of technologies, the ROI is originally very good. Then it becomes great as you're able to achieve scale, improve the technology, and go to market. And it goes from being something for a small group of people into being a mass adopted technology. And that's the train we're on now.
Yeah, and you're trying to drive down price, right? So like you already gave the example of like, let's say 5-10 years ago, how much a full body scan would cost via MRI. You're already below 10% of that. But I think that you have different services that can be much cheaper and still doing early detection. And then you have some that are broader. So like, talk to us about price and what you're thinking, because again, you've succeeded when you get this as mass adoption, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely.
Like, and you want it to be out there for everyone and accessible.
Absolutely. So we know that we can get to a 10-minute, $500 full body scan. Wow. So the question is, how do we get there? Well, we've already brought the scan down from like $20,000 before Ezra to $1,350. Our Ezra flash scan is 30 minutes, $1,350. There are 3 cost centers to a scan. There's the scan itself, there's the radiology report generation done by the radiologist, and then there's operational internal costs. And we have AIs that are essentially automating and decreasing time across all of those 3 cost centers. And we're currently building AIs that will enable us to get to a 10-minute full body scan that is analyzed by a radiologist in maybe like 10 minutes, and where our internal processes are fully automated. When we get there, we'll be able to offer a $500 full body scan. And at that price point, I believe payers will start reimbursing it, and then everyone can get it.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that, because we've spent some time on the GLP-1s talking about the payers. I mean, this has been one of the big hurdles. Obviously, shortages is another thing. Are you guys facing, are there a shortage of MRI machines? You know what I mean? Like, so talk to us about like some of the logistics that would really, kind of move it towards mass adoption if we kind of had, greater access to the screening, stations, I guess you would, and then insurance coverage.
Yeah, so there are 41 MRIs per 100,000 people in the US. And so we need more MRIs, that's for sure. What we also need is higher throughput of these MRIs. And part of what Ezra does with Ezra Flash is we make MRIs higher throughput. And so you can envision a future in which our technology is used for any scans, thus enabling facilities to scan a lot more people on a daily basis, therefore being able to scan more people. Payers also, they care about screening. That's why they cover mammograms, they cover colonoscopies, they cover lung exams and so on. But they care about screening at a particular price point for a particular risk profile. And so our goal is to get into that sweet spot, to have a scan that's affordable, that targets initially probably higher risk populations, where if you are at high risk for pancreatic, liver, and gallbladder cancer, Aetna will just give you a full body scan because they know that it will help improve outcomes and it will help them save money.
Yeah. So Rick, you mentioned the term megatrends. How do you guys think of this as an investor? Like, how does this fit into that? Obviously, within healthcare, there's a handful, right? And GLP-1s is like, I think Goldman just put a number on this in like 2 years. They're expecting this to be a $150 billion market. You know what I mean? It keeps sticking, ticking up.
And that category is being created from nothing a couple of years ago. And I think similarly, Ezra's creating a category out of nothing. Obviously super important. I think obesity is at least a forebearer of many of the tremendous health problems that including cancer, that affect probably health span even more than lifespan, but obviously drives the cost of overall healthcare in this country. Cancer does, obviously tumors do, and how do you get to those root causes? And actually, probably as important as a lot of these companies are starting with self-pay, that how do you get people more aware of this? So you're not relying on the payer network just to front all this, but you're saying, hey, if I can increase your health span or lifespan, this is more important than paying for another cup of coffee a day when it's a very approachable expense. And by doing that, you're kicking off that cycle. So you're driving adoption, you're able to drive the cost down, you're able to get into more MRI centers, you're able to make those MRIs more effective, which causes them to buy more MRIs, which then makes it more accessible. And you're riding that mega trend, but driving it down cyclically to provide greater access. And I think whether it's the longevity trend, whether it's knowing and wanting to control more, which is a tangential in your healthcare, or just a lot of the things around, hey, people wanting to age better and more healthily, all is super important. And I think we're seeing a lot of these businesses that not only Ezra, but the other things we mentioned are really benefiting from this and are really driving fundamental demand.
Yeah. So, give me a sense, like, who are the incumbents? Like, when you set out to kind of do this, who did you want to disrupt? You know what I mean? It seems like it's kind of some stodgy old healthcare institutions, right? Which seems like kind of easy pickings, I would assume, from like a pretty innovative entrepreneur like yourself.
Yeah. So, actually the unfortunate thing is that in the US, most of the health system is a sick care system. We're not focusing on helping people stay healthy. We're just focusing on treating them when they are unhealthy. When it comes to cancer, that's completely backwards, because if someone is in a hospital, no matter how good the doctor, no matter how good the hospital, if they find cancer late, their survival rate will be very low. There was actually an interview with the CEO of the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center recently, who's a pancreatic cancer surgeon and has been for 30 years. And he was saying 30 years into this job, 30 years into being a surgeon, and he believes that the best thing we can do for patients is find cancer early for them. So in many ways, for Ezra, we didn't really have an incumbent because there's no way to find pancreatic cancer or liver cancer or gallbladder cancer and so on now without Ezra. The thing that we've had to fight has been a kind of small corner of the medical community that has said, oh, no, don't do full body scans because of the concern for incidental findings and false positives and overdiagnosis and so on. Many of those concerns are legitimate, valid. You need to do these scans correctly. But if you go to 10 people on the street and ask them, hey, what would you like, to do a scan that may lead to a follow-up scan or die of cancer? 10 people will say, I don't want to die of cancer.
What are some of the biggest pushbacks again? Because, it seems like a false positive could kind of give somebody, a bit of a cardiac issue. That sort of thing. Yes. But, and obviously you guys have a lot of disclaimers about that. You're going to walk them through all of you said earlier, you just put it in plain English and the like here. What are some of the biggest pushbacks?
Yeah, so by far the biggest pushback is the concern for false positives leading to invasive follow-up procedures that lead to nothing. And so to address that, what we've developed at Ezra is kind of a 3-step process. The first thing we do is we have a type of full body MRI called a multiparametric full body scan, which means that we use different types of sequences to look at an organ in order to determine whether a certain finding has malignant potential or not. And this is a practice that's very popular in prostate imaging, and we just expanded it to the entire body. So we have a very specific type of scan that helps us increase the specificity of the protocol. Specificity is the measure of false positives, essentially. So the higher the specificity, the lower the false positives. Secondly, we built this Ezra Reporter AI that not only is translating into plain English what every single finding means, but it also assigns a score to every single finding, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 1, 2 being informative, they're green. 3 being yellow, indeterminate, needs to be monitored. 4 and 5 being likely cancer, you need to do something about it. This scoring system enables us to tell people very clearly what they need to follow up on and what they don't. And then thirdly, what we recommend is an annual scan. And by doing an annual scan, you have built-in follow-up. So if you find something that's an E-score of 3, you don't need to do anything about it because you're going to monitor it over time using our scan. And later this year, we'll be publishing a specificity study that will show our specificity numbers in order to be able to kind of address the concerns that some of the medical community have around full body scans.
And as we thought about it in our diligence, we kind of always go back to it's better to know, right? There's an ongoing trend, and whether that's in business and whether you're thinking about your balance sheet and your payables or receivables, or you're thinking about your pancreas, it's always better to know. And we thought, as much as that, a lot of the old school doctors and even payers are saying, hey, we don't want to create hypochondriacs. We believe that knowing is better than not knowing, and information is better than not having information. And therefore, we thought this was going to be better off for everyone.
So, Rick,
Agreed.
your partner, Matt Turk, he's been working on this ML, AI and data for over 10 years now. You probably know Matt, I'm assuming too. And, again, and I make this point quite often when we're talking to you, is like, you guys are not Johnny-come-latelys to machine learning and AI. How did you, when you first met Emi, like, were you thinking about this as the concept became more developed, as like a great application for AI and ultimately moving towards generative AI? Because again, we're spending a lot of time talking about, buzzwords, we've seen them in every tech cycle, but you're a company that's actually built on the fabric of, artificial intelligence and machine learning and the like.
And as we talked about, this was before AI was cool. Years before AI was cool. And it was, hey,
is Matt cool now, by the way, or no? No, still.
He's French, so
we hope he's listening. Yeah. I once called him German on a pod, and he was pissed at me.
That'd be worse than uncool. That's much worse for a Frenchman than uncool. but being able to say, hey, this is a healthcare services company that is super powered with a competitive advantage driven through AI, which it was very funny, in the quarter or the 6 months after we did Ezra, and again, this is 2019, Matt said, well, it's so funny that AI is funding, AI is the competitive advantage of all of our companies that we funded over that period, which is obviously through his glasses, that was true. But, what we see is AI software really being able to provide a different level of care and being able to provide a much better system of care than anything else. And also, not only that, but there's a significant competitive advantage as this needs to be FDA approved around your AI. So if you look at all these different pieces of AI that are all floating around and, probably the 100 business plans that I've missed since we've been talking here today that all are .ai companies, very rarely do you see one that's completely unique and FDA approved that creates a real moat around a business.
All right, let's talk about this. We do call it funders and founders. Like, let's talk about the relationship, how it started after that initial kind of investing. Rick's been on the board. How has it evolved a little bit? I've heard a lot about Rick. He's also an investor in Revolutionizing Media. He's been a great partner. And the FirstMark community has been great. I've met so many of their other portfolio company founders. They have such a great established position here in New York, but obviously not just New York, across the country, internationally. Yeah, but I listen, I'm being serious. I mean, I don't think we could have done what we've been able to do in the last few years without their partnership and their support. So talk to us a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah, well, Dan, so the startups are kind of up and down. And I'm going to tell you, not just because
it's never a straight line.
Never a straight line. And there have been a couple of times in the company's history where I'm not sure the company would have survived without Rick and FirstMark. And so we now have known each other for 5 years. We met through Ryan Moore at Accomplice, who led our seed round, who's fantastic.
Great friend, who's a co-investor in DraftKings.
Yeah. And Ryan introduced me to Rick. This is 2019. We went through a process. We were fortunate to have 2 term sheets down on the table. We chose Rick. FirstMark seemed like the investor and Rick especially in healthcare in New York City. And is one of the best decisions I've made with
Ezra. It's kind of cool. I mean, as I've gotten to know Rick, I don't know if you know this, I met him on the set of CNBC's Fast Money. This was 2013, and I've told this story before, but one of the things was like the day after Twitter went public, and Rick, as a very early investor in Pinterest, the question was, what's the next internet company? And we don't use that expression anymore, but when I see some of the investments that you guys have made and some of the founders and some of the success that they've had, obviously Ezra and Row are 2 great examples. This is a lot more important than figuring out the next messaging app or, you know what I mean, that sort of thing. And so talk to us a little bit about that. Like for you, Rick, like you guys kind of moved on from some of these sort of things.
And it's a little bit different. I mean, as you know, Emi talked a little bit about the roller coaster ride that every startup is. And we said, we invested at the end of 2019, about, less than 100 days later, nobody in the world was allowed to go into an MRI machine for a year. So all of our visions of grandeur, of what was going to happen as we're able to take this somewhat nascent technology and roll it out across the world, just stopped, was not allowed. And if it was allowed, people taking voluntary trips to a healthcare facility to sit in an MRI where someone had just sat was outside the bounds of reality. And therefore, what do you do? The unknown of what do you do, and you work through it. And I think that's how you build relationships of saying, there's a million things that could have happened, or you could work through it. And I think we've worked through that. We've worked through, hey, what are the alternative financing strategies to get from here to there? And I think it's been a great working relationship. But, this is not a messaging app. This is not something else you download. This is people going to a healthcare facility, getting scanned, and hopefully saving their lives. And, what Emi hasn't hit on is, Ezra saves lives every month, several. And we hear amazing stories of mothers and fathers and children having their lives saved by this. So it's I would say, not only more difficult, but definitely more important than the next message.
Well, and I have to assume, so as you kind of rack up early detection and saving lives, the number of false positives leading to invasive procedures, as you just mentioned, that must be dropping. So the ratio must be, right? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you that we've scanned, it will be at tens of thousands by the end of this year of people. 6.4% of our members have found cancer.
That's amazing.
Many of these individuals have reached out to me with an email or a text or a call saying that they got treated. Their doctors told them that if not for Ezra, they would have found the cancer in a few years when it would have been too late. And they're now cancer-free.
So talk to me. Is it word of mouth? Like, or do doctors recommend these products? Like, how are people finding out? Obviously, I found out about it through Rick, but and I met you a couple years ago. But like, how are generally people coming upon Ezra?
Yeah, so the vast majority of our customers are organic. So word of mouth, referrals, people telling other people.
Podcasts,
yes. Exactly. Other folks getting scanned and posting on social media and so on. That's a big channel for us. And then our fastest growing channel is physicians. Concierge physicians, primary care physicians, who 5 years ago, by the way, some of them were resistant to getting scans, are now referring scans to their patients. And I recently had a physician calling me to say that he was skeptical at first, and then he had 2 patients who got a scan against his kind of recommendation not to, and both of them had significant findings. So he was like, okay, scan all my
Where do you
patients.
go away from cancer? I'm sure you're kind of thinking about some other like really serious illness or disease.
Absolutely. So we designed the scan to focus on cancer. However, the nice thing about MRI is that it catches everything else as well. And so we have 500 other types of diseases that we can find in an Ezra scan, from fatty liver disease to disc herniations to aneurysms to endometriosis.
I have all those, by the way.
Especially endometriosis, I'm sure.
There's no false positives on those. So it's like check. Yep.
Yeah. And also, cancer is the #1 killer in the US, followed by heart disease. And so in our full body protocol, we have a scan that we call Full Body Plus, where aside from the full body MRI, we've included a low dose chest CT that screens for lung cancer and looks for coronary heart disease through a calcium score. And we have numerous members for whom we have found calcium scores that were so high that their cardiologist put them on a statin immediately. We've even had someone who had to do a double bypass surgery as a result of his Ezra scan, and now he's alive and well.
All right, so we started out by talking about you were at high risk for this, for cancer, obviously.
For skin cancer.
This was one of the things that kind of motivated you to figure this sort of thing out. And, I remember meeting you, and we talked a bit about biohacking. And this is something that Rick and I are the same age, and we know a lot of really smart, motivated folks like yourself at your age, and you're just doing things that just we would never have done. You know what I mean? Like to me, so hearing how you live your life, some of the experiments that you've done, talk to us a little bit about that and how that plays into the mission with Ezra a little bit.
Absolutely. So actually, so I track 150 biomarkers about my body, blood tests, imaging, MRI, obviously. I do DEXA scans.
Right. So the listener can't see you. So you have whoops on each of your ankles, plus,
basically, yes. I mean, like I wear an Apple Watch.
You're like the bionic man.
I'm trying to get there. And so I track all of these metrics, and I actually have a spreadsheet where on a monthly basis, I put them all in and I plot them and in order to optimize my health. And this all started because I used to get very, very frequent headaches. And so I was like, well, what's causing this? So I said, this was a decade ago. And so I started tracking all of this stuff in a spreadsheet and concluded that the primary reason why I have headaches is stress. Nothing I can do about that, running a startup. But at least I kind of got to the bottom of it. And I literally did everything from blood tests to scans to gastroendoscopies to just like you name it, I've done it. And so now what I do is I track all of these things for the purpose of optimizing performance. And so my goal is to hit peak performance when I'm 40, which is in 2 years, and then maintain that performance for the second half of my life. And obviously—
Seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, it's kind of like. Well, let's say, what is peak performance? How do you define peak performance?
Yeah, so I've taken metrics that are.
And is that blood oxygen level?
It's VO2 max is the best indicator for longevity.
Yep.
So, for example, the average man at 40 has a VO2 max of 48. If you want to be,
what is that? What does that mean for the listeners at home?
So that means that you can run a 9.5-minute mile.
For how many miles?
Rick, we got that. I can do 2 of those.
For 5 miles.
Oh, all right. I'm out.
So I have a VO2 max of 50, which puts me in the top percentile for my age group.
Okay.
And I want to be in the top percentile for any age group, which would be a VO2 max of 58. At a VO2, so the way to think about VO2 max is for every point of VO2 max you add a month of lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if I'm improving my VO2 max from 48 to 58, I add a year basically in my lifespan.
So are we too late at 51 years old?
No. There's actually Peter Attia posted this amazing video.
Yeah.
There's this gentleman who started rowing in his 60s, and he just started rowing every single day. And he's now 98 or something.
Well, I met him through you. Alan Patrikoff is like 110, and he just did a pod with us here. He was sitting here, he like ran a marathon.
Yeah,
he was the oldest person to run the New York Marathon. I saw him out at dinner last Friday. This just got married.
Remember that Ricky Gervais bit that he did in one of his stand-ups recently? Is like he went to his doctor, and his doctor said, "Listen, you got to stop drinking, and you got to eat better, or you're going to cut 5 years off your life." And he goes to him, "You mean like those last 5 years, like 80 to 85? He's like, "I'm good. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing here." Yeah. So like the longevity thing amongst your age group and people who are kind of motivated like you, it's a real thing right now.
And obviously a good friend of Ezra is Brian Johnson.
Yep.
So you're not that
extreme. No.
But what's one thing that someone listening should be thinking? Is it VO2 max and being able to track that?
Yeah, so I'd say it's 3 things that matter. And there are a million things you can do, but it's only 3 things that matter for health span. So living, maybe you live to 90, but they're like completely healthy years. Number 1 metric is VO2 max. Mm-hmm. Number 2 metric is muscle mass. Mm-hmm. Number 3 metric is bone density. Mm-hmm. Those 2, muscle mass and bone density, are really important because the number 1, aside from chronic disease, so cancer, heart disease, the number 1 killer for older people is comorbidities caused by you fell and you had a hip fracture and you end up in a hospital and you couldn't move, and that led to kidney failure and so on. So how do you avoid that? You avoid that by having muscle mass and by having strong bone density, which you can do through weightlifting and resistance training. And then the only other thing is you need your lungs and heart to function properly, which is what VO2 max gives you. So if you optimize for those 3 metrics, that's it, actually. And obviously, don't drink alcohol in moderation. Not too much red meat. Get screened for cancer, most important.
Let's put down those oaky Chardonnays.
Yeah.
All right, listen, I want to finish off with this because, again, we've had this amazing opportunity during this years to talk to so many great, entrepreneurs, founders, and the like. And I really find it interesting to hear alongside them, somebody, a board member, an investor, that sort of thing. So, Rick, what excites you? This is something that obviously you guys at FirstMark are very passionate about, this vertical and the like, and you found some great companies to back and great founders. What's something that really excites you about the future of Ezra?
No, I think you're saving lives. Yeah. I mean, that's simple. That, I can see a world where everyone's doing this and you're able to increase lifespan and health span 5 to 10 years. And that's, you can't put a price tag on it.
Yeah.
And I think that therefore the way that Emi's changing the world is going to change a lot of people's worlds and a lot of people's lives.
So, Emi, what are some milestones that you guys are kind of working towards? Obviously, you just talked about how you're trying to drive down the price. You want to get as many people taking these as possible. I'm sure you want to grow geographically. What are some things internally that you guys are kind of solving for here? And, again, I think that this is the sort of company we're going to hear more and more about. And I'm just saying, as a consumer, if you're telling me that a lot of folks are hearing about this word of mouth, what are some of those milestones that you think it's going to get out to a much broader audience?
For sure. So I'll give you the 1, 3, and 10-year milestones. I'm kind of personally dedicated to this for the rest of my career, and I can't think of anything else to work on. And so in a year, we want to be everywhere in the US. That's kind of what we're working on. We want to be within a few miles of almost any person in the United States so that you can get a scan. On a 3-year horizon, we want to have a $500 scan. And we know we can get there probably by 2026. And we're going to do that by building more AIs that will decrease our costs, and we're going to pass those cost savings to consumers. On a 10-year horizon, we're going to have a North Star at Ezra, which is that 10 million people every year find cancer late.
Mm-hmm.
Only about 1.5, 1.7 million of these people survive longer than 5 years. So very, very small percentage because they found cancer late. What we want is to help those 10 million people find cancer early,
Mm-hmm.
which, given that we find cancer about 6% of our members, that means we need to screen about 180, 200 million people a year in order to find cancer early for those 10 million people who will otherwise not find it early and therefore die. And that's the goal in the next decade.
That's amazing. Well, listen, I mean, again, we meet lots of folks who are doing some things that seem really cool. They have big addressable markets. They're going to be really profitable, but they're just hacking our brains. And I think you guys are trying to do the opposite. You're trying to keep us around a lot longer. And again, you just mentioned like early detection for a disease like cancer. I think a lot of folks just kind of deal with cancer when they get it, and they just have to deal with all the treatment that goes with it. So it's really amazing mission. You seem like an amazing guy, an amazing founder, and obviously, Rick, it's my pleasure to meet Emi this way. So
always fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Appreciate
this is great.
Thanks, man.